There is an additional clause.
The remainder of my estate, including all voting shares, shall be placed in a lifetime trust for Margaret, effective immediately.
It was previously unknown to anyone, especially the primary beneficiary.
The entire estate shall transfer immediately to Margaret Lawson, in full.
The balance had finally shifted. Justice was mine.
The phone call came in the early hours of the morning, shattering the fragile calm of my world. My son Daniel was gone. The words tumbled out of the receiver, each syllable heavier than the last. He's been in an accident. He didn't make it. For a moment, the room spun around me. The world I had known, the one I had built with my son, collapsed in an instant. The laughter we had shared, the countless evenings spent talking about everything and nothing now existed only in memory. My heart felt as though it had been ripped from my chest, and the tears came unbidden, flowing like an unstoppable river of grief. Daniel had always been my pride, my joy, my reason for smiling, even on the hardest days. Losing him was like losing a piece of myself, an emptiness that no comfort or prayer could ever fill. Ow. I wandered through the house aimlessly, touching the things he had left behind, the half-read books on his bedside table, the worn slippers he always left by the door, the coffee mug he preferred to use every morning. Each item was a dagger to my heart, a cruel reminder that he would never return. My grief was raw, unfiltered, and suffocating. I had thought I would at least have my family to lean on. I had imagined we would face this together, mourning my son, comforting one another. But I was wrong. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, who had once smiled sweetly at me during family gatherings, greeted me not with compassion, but with a cold, calculating stare. Her eyes, once warm and lively, were now sharp, assessing, and devoid of empathy. I could almost feel the words forming on her lips before she spoke. "You shouldn't be here. It's too much. For everyone." Her tone was polite, almost rehearsed, but the underlying meaning was clear. I was no longer welcome in the home that I had shared with Daniel. She had taken control of everything, the house, the furniture, even the smallest routines my son and I had cherished. It was as if Daniel's presence had never existed, erased by her ambition and cunning. I could barely comprehend the betrayal, the sheer audacity of her coldness in my time of mourning. I tried to protest, to remind her that I had been Daniel's mother, that I had cared for him every day of his life, that he had loved me, and I had loved him in return. But Vanessa's expression never wavered. Her words cut deeper than any blade. "I need space. This is my home now. You need to leave." It was as if Daniel's death had been an opportunity for her to claim everything for herself, and I was an inconvenient obstacle. The room seemed to close in around me. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even cry properly. I felt like a ghost in the very house that had been my sanctuary for decades. Memories flashed before my eyes. Daniel's first steps on this very carpet. The birthday cakes we had baked together. The nights spent talking about his dreams and fears. How could someone so intimately connected to him treat me as though I were nothing? My heart ached with the injustice, and a sense of helplessness washed over me like a tidal wave. I gathered a few belongings in a trembling pile, clutching the small mementos of Daniel that I couldn't bear to part with. His childhood drawings, a photo of the two of us at the beach, a scarf he had knitted for me one Christmas. Vanessa watched silently, arms crossed, her expression one of quiet triumph. The humiliation and betrayal I felt were compounded by the realization that I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My grief had been made public, exposed to cruelty in its rawest form. As I stepped out of the house for the last time, the cold winter air bit at my cheeks, mingling with the tears I could no longer hold back. Every step felt surreal, as if I were walking through someone else's nightmare. I glanced back at the door, at the home that had been filled with warmth and laughter, now barred to me. The walls that had echoed with my son's voice were silent, claimed by a woman who seemed determined to erase his memory. My heart ached with both sorrow and rage. In the days that followed, I wandered the streets, searching for solace in places that offered none. Friends and distant relatives offered kind words and gestures, but none could fill the hollow space left by Daniel's absence or the betrayal that had followed. Each night I lay awake in a borrowed bed, haunted by memories and anger, questioning how someone could be so cruel, so heartless. The world seemed unfair, unkind, and I felt utterly alone. Yet amidst the heartbreak and humiliation, a tiny spark of resolve began to flicker. I would not let Vanessa's treachery define my life. I would endure, I would survive, and somehow, just as whatever form it might take would find its way back to me. For now, though, the grief was unbearable, the betrayal raw, and the house that had once been my sanctuary, nothing more than a memory. It was in this darkest hour, teetering between despair and determination, that I realized my journey was only beginning. The first night away from my son's house was unbearable. I had never felt so adrift, so unmoored from the life I had known. The borrowed bed creaked beneath me, a hollow echo of the familiar mattress I had slept on for years in the home that now belonged entirely to Vanessa. My body ached, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest, the hollow emptiness that refused to be filled. I missed Daniel, not just his presence, but his laughter, his gentle voice, the way he always knew how to make even the bleakest day feel lighter. I stayed with a distant cousin, a kind woman who had insisted I come immediately after being turned out. She offered me a room, warm blankets, and her company, yet the sense of displacement was suffocating. Every object in the room was a reminder that I no longer had a place of my own. My life, once anchored in the love and safety of my family, now felt like a ship lost at sea, tossed about by waves of grief and uncertainty. During the quiet moments, my mind wandered back to memories of Daniel. I remembered the morning of his 5th birthday when I had woken him with a tray of pancakes shaped like stars, and he had laughed so hard he nearly cried. I could still see the sparkle in his eyes as he tore open the wrapping paper of a gift I had carefully chosen. A small telescope he had begged for months. That was Daniel, always dreaming, always curious, always full of light. I thought of the nights we had spent talking late into the evening, our voices low so as not to wake anyone else. He had confided in me his hopes, his fears, the little worries that seemed trivial but were monumental to him. I had listened, offered advice when he sought it, and mostly just held space for him to feel heard. I realized then how privileged I had been to share those moments, how unfair it felt that life had snatched them away so suddenly. And yet, even in my grief, I could see the subtle truths that had escaped me while Daniel was alive. Vanessa had always been different, outwardly sweet, polite to friends and family. She had presented herself as the perfect daughter-in-law. But in the weeks since Daniel's death, her true colors had emerged, sharp and calculating. She had moved quickly to assert control over everything: Daniel's possessions, his schedule, even the smallest details of the household. I had been blind to her ambition, dismissing it as harmless confidence, but now her intentions were laid bare. I realized how easily she had manipulated situations to her advantage. The way she spoke to the neighbors about Daniel's generosity, how she carefully framed every decision as logical and reasonable, while cutting me out, it was all deliberate. She had waited for the perfect moment, my moment of greatest vulnerability, to make her move. That realization made my grief even heavier, a mix of sorrow and indignation that twisted in my gut. Yet, amidst this storm of betrayal and loss, I tried to find moments of solace. I walked through nearby parks, letting the crisp air brush against my cheeks, remembering the afternoons Daniel and I had spent feeding the ducks, laughing as they quacked around our feet. I wandered past the bakery where we had once shared a chocolate croissant every Saturday morning, the small joys of life that had felt mundane then now seemed priceless. These memories were bittersweet, but they reminded me of the bond we had shared, a bond that no one could take away. At night, I would sit by the window in my temporary room, clutching Daniel's scarf, inhaling the faint scent that still lingered, and whispering to him as if he could hear me. I confessed my fears, my anger, my sorrow, and sometimes I would cry until my body trembled with exhaustion. Yet even in those moments of weakness, a seed of determination was planted. I could not allow Vanessa's cruelty to define the rest of my life. Daniel had been my anchor, my guiding light, and I would honor him by continuing, by surviving, by finding a way to reclaim the dignity she had tried to strip from me. One afternoon, as I rummaged through a thrift shop for necessities, I overheard a conversation between two women discussing how easy it was to manipulate the system when someone vulnerable was involved. Their words struck me like a thunderbolt. Vanessa had done exactly that. She had counted on my grief, my helplessness, to secure her control. And yet, her confidence was her own undoing. I realized she had underestimated my love for Daniel. It's the lessons he had instilled in me, the resilience I had developed over the years. I spent hours each day reflecting on the past, sifting through memories, trying to find meaning in the chaos. I remembered Daniel's smile, the way he always said, "Mom, everything will be okay," even when things were far from okay. He had believed in me, and perhaps it was time I began to believe in myself. I began to make quiet plans, thinking about how I could navigate the world without a home, without the man I loved, and yet still honor his memory. Though the road ahead was uncertain, I felt a subtle shift within me. The fear and sorrow were still there, but they were now accompanied by something else, a sense of purpose, I would survive this betrayal, not for Vanessa, not for the world, but for Daniel. And somewhere in that determination, amidst the pain and the loss, I began to understand that home was not just a place, it was the love we carried with us. The memories that refused to fade, and the courage to face whatever came next. The news arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, carried in the soft, measured tone of a family lawyer who had been a quiet presence in Daniela's life for years. "Mrs. Lawson," she said gently, "the reading of your son's will is scheduled for next week. We'll be notified of the exact date and time." The words should have been simple, almost procedural, yet they stirred a storm within me. My heart leaped with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that perhaps somehow Daniel had left a portion of his estate for me, a small gesture to ease the pain of my loss. Feared that in the cruelest twist of irony, Vanessa would inherit everything, and I would remain nothing more than a shadow in the home my son had built. And then there was curiosity, the burning, uneasy urge to know, to uncover the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. For days, I vacillated between excitement and dread. Could I attend the reading without trembling? Could I face Vanessa without letting my emotions betray me? The thought of confronting her, of seeing her smug expression as if she had already claimed victory, made my stomach churn. I spent hours rehearsing my composure, practicing the polite, neutral tone I would need to survive the encounter. Vanessa, of course, made no effort to hide her confidence. Even before the reading, whispers of her arrogance reached me through mutual acquaintances. She spoke openly to neighbors and distant relatives, casually announcing that Daniel's wishes had been made clear, that everything would go to her. The ease with which she claimed ownership of a life that was once shared with my son made my blood boil. But I reminded myself that this battle was not won by anger alone. Patience, subtlety, and resilience would be my allies. The days leading up to the reading were filled with restless nights. I lay awake in my temporary room, staring at the ceiling, imagining how the moment would unfold. Would Vanessa gloat openly, daring to look at me with that imperious smile? Would there be other family members, their eyes flicking between us, aware of the tension simmering beneath polite words? My mind ran in circles, and I could not stop thinking of Daniel. What would he have wanted me to do in this moment? Would he have wanted me to confront Vanessa, to plead, to demand justice, or to remain calm, dignified, and patient? In the midst of my anxiety, I found myself reflecting on my life with Daniel, the countless mornings we shared coffee and conversation, the quiet evenings filled with laughter and warmth. I remembered how he had always treated me with respect, how he had valued my opinions, and how he had nurtured my spirit even in the most difficult times. These memories, bittersweet as they were, gave me strength. Daniel's presence, though gone, still guided me, reminding me that my dignity and courage mattered more than any house or inheritance. On the day of the reading, I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were simple yet respectable. I wanted to present myself as calm and composed, a stark contrast to Vanessa's anticipated display of smug confidence. As I approached the lawyer's office, I saw her waiting near the entrance, impeccably dressed, her posture flawless, her expression one of smug certainty. She caught my eye and gave a small, tight-lipped smile, as if to say, "Everything is already mine." I swallowed hard, forcing my lips into a polite smile, and stepped inside. The room was modest but formal, lined with chairs for family members and close friends. And at the front stood the lawyer, papers neatly stacked, eyes attentive and serious. The air was thick with tension, each small movement amplified, each glance exchanged heavy with unspoken words. Vanessa's gaze met mine, and I felt the silent battle begin. A contest of wills that had been simmering since the day she had thrown me out. As the lawyer began to speak, outlining procedural details before the reading, I could feel my pulse quicken. Each word was deliberate, measured, but my mind raced ahead, imagining the moment the envelopes would be opened, the declarations read aloud, the fates revealed. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her eyes scanning the room, absorbing every reaction with predatory calculation. She leaned back, confident, almost regal in her composure, as though she had already claimed victory before a single word had been spoken. I, on the other hand, held my breath, fighting the urge to tremble. I reminded myself that this was more than a battle for property or possessions. It was a test of character, of resilience, of honoring Daniel's memory. I could not allow Vanessa's arrogance to intimidate me. The house, the inheritance, even the public perception, none of it mattered more than maintaining the integrity Daniel had valued in both of us. The minutes crawled by, each one heavier than the last. I glanced at Vanessa, then away, then at the lawyer. Anticipation and fear collided within me, creating a tension that seemed almost tangible. And yet, beneath the anxiety, a quiet determination began to take root.
No matter what the will contained, no matter how smug Vanessa appeared,
I would face the outcome with dignity. I would endure, I would survive, and, if fate allowed, I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, just in material terms. But in the sense of justice and respect that had been so cruelly denied, as the envelopes were finally handed to the lawyer, the room fell silent. All the waiting, the rehearsed composure, the trembling nights, everything led to this single moment. I clenched my hands in my lap, reminding myself of Daniel's guidance, his wisdom, and his love. Whatever came next, I would face it head-on. The battle for truth and justice was about to begin, and I would not flinch. The day of the will reading arrived with a tension so thick it felt almost tangible, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. The room was modest, yet formal, lined with leather chairs and polished wooden panels that reflected the subdued sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Family members and close friends had gathered, their expressions polite but curious, their whispered conversations carrying the subtle undertone of anticipation. I felt a knot in my stomach, equal parts dread and hope, and gripped the edge of my chair until my knuckles turned white. Vanessa sat across the room, her posture impeccable, her fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. She smiled with a practiced ease, a smile that dared anyone to question her control over the situation. It was clear to everyone that she expected victory, that she already imagined herself walking away with every possession, every asset, and every token of Daniel's life. I could see the confidence radiating from her, like sunlight from a high noon sky, blinding in its arrogance. The notary, a solemn man with glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, cleared his throat and began the proceedings. He outlined the legal formalities with precision, his voice calm and steady. Everyone listened attentively, but my attention was focused entirely on the envelope before him. The sealed document that contained Daniel's final words, his last instructions, and his ultimate wishes. I swallowed hard, feeling the tension coiling in my chest like a living thing, threatening to crush me from within. When the will was first read aloud, the words seemed to fall like a hammer. Vanessa's name appeared repeatedly, each mention a confirmation of what I had feared. The house, the car, the savings, most of it, had been left to her, and the notary read each line with careful authority. I felt a hollow ache spread through me, an echo of the grief that had never truly left. My hands trembled, and I looked down at my lap, trying to hide the tears that threatened to spill. It was as though Daniel's life, his legacy, had been handed entirely to the very person who had betrayed me, the person who had cast me out when I needed to grieve. Vanessa's smug smile widened, her eyes flicking toward me with a look that said plainly, "This is mine. You have nothing?" The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing down as the sense of injustice became almost unbearable. For a moment, I felt as though I might collapse under the weight of it all, as though the last threads of hope had been severed. But then the notary paused, adjusting his glasses and clearing his throat again. There was a moment of silence, a careful, deliberate pause that seemed to stretch on endlessly. He looked around the room, his gaze settling briefly on me. And then he spoke words that made the air in the room shift, electric and charged. There is an additional clause in Mr. Lawson's will, drafted approximately 3 months prior to his passing. This clause has legal standing and was unknown to Mrs. Vanessa Lawson until today. The words struck like lightning. Vanessa's confident expression faltered, if only for the briefest instant. A flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she masked it with a forced composure. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of cautious hope and anxious anticipation surging through me. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair as I leaned forward, straining to hear every word that followed. The notary continued, explaining that this secret clause had been a deliberate provision by Daniel, a measure to ensure that his mother would be cared for, regardless of any actions taken by others after his death. He spoke carefully, outlining the conditions set by Daniel, conditions designed to protect me and, more importantly, to reveal the true character of those around him. I felt a surge of disbelief, a rush of emotion so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Daniel had thought of this, even as he faced the fragility of life. He had anticipated that his absence might create conflict, that those he had trusted might not act in accordance with what he knew was right, and he had acted preemptively, quietly, carefully, ensuring that justice and care for me would not be left to chance. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line, her confidence visibly shaken now. She leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowed, as though trying to comprehend the legal language that so clearly worked against her interests. The shift in power was subtle, but undeniable, the first real crack in the facade she had maintained for so long. I, meanwhile, felt a cautious warmth spread through me, a fragile sense of vindication mixed with relief. I had been dismissed, humiliated, and cast out. But Daniel had left a safeguard, a measure that honored his love and protected me even in my absence. The notary did not yet reveal the full scope of the clause, instead taking careful steps to ensure the reading followed protocol. But the room's atmosphere had changed irrevocably. Whispers rose softly among the other attendees, their curiosity and surprise palpable. Vanessa's confidence wavered further, the arrogance replaced by a tight-lipped tension. And I realized, with a mixture of awe and gratitude, that Daniel's foresight had given me a chance not just to reclaim what might have been lost, but to witness truth unfolding, to see the reality of character and intention revealed before my eyes. As the notary set the stage for the full revelation of the clause, I could feel the anticipation coiling in my chest like a spring ready to burst. This was the moment Daniel had prepared, the moment that could change everything. The initial reading had seemed a defeat, a cruel confirmation of Vanessa's triumph. But now, with the secret clause looming, the outcome was no longer certain. The truth, carefully hidden for months, was about to emerge, and with it, the possibility of justice, vindication, and a reckoning that had been long overdue. The room held its collective breath. I sat upright, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the notary, ready to hear the words that would decide the course of everything to come. The room seemed to hold its breath as the notary unfolded the final pages of Daniel's will, his glasses glinting under the subdued lighting. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the armrest, her smile still there, but more strained, more fragile than before. I sat upright, my hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from a strange mixture of hope and anticipation. After weeks of grief, humiliation, and exile, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The notary began to read the additional clause slowly, deliberately, ensuring that every word carried the weight Daniel had intended. This clause, he began, was drafted 3 months prior to my passing. Its purpose is to safeguard the well-being of my mother, Margaret Lawson, and to ensure that the intentions behind the inheritance reflect the character and actions of those involved. Vanessa's eyebrows arched slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Character? She muttered under her breath, as if the term itself were an affront. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing heart. The words that followed were precise, calculated, and damning. Should any beneficiary, specifically my wife, act in a manner that is selfish, disrespectful, or harmful to my mother, including the act of removing her from her home. Any property, financial assets, Rights initially designated to that beneficiary shall automatically transfer to my mother, Margaret Lawson, effective immediately. A ripple of shock passed through the room. Vanessa's confident posture faltered. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. I could feel the shift in the air. The slow unraveling of the narrative she had so carefully constructed over the past weeks. The notary paused, allowing the clause to settle in everyone's mind. I sat frozen for a moment, disbelief mingling with a growing sense of vindication. Daniel had thought of this, anticipated every cruel possibility, and had ensured that I would not suffer the consequences of Vanessa's greed. My eyes met Vanessa's, and for the first time since Daniel's death, I saw the mask slip. Her composure cracked. The arrogance, the certainty, the illusion of control shattered in an instant. You can't do this," Vanessa finally blurted, her voice sharp but unsteady. I didn't. This is unfair." The notary's expression remained neutral, his voice calm but firm. "The clause was legally binding and executed according to your husband's explicit wishes. The condition is clear. Actions taken against Mrs. Lawson result in immediate transfer of assets and property to her." A stunned silence fell over the room. Some relatives exchanged glances, astonished at the cunning foresight Daniel had displayed. Friends whispered softly, their curiosity and astonishment barely contained. And in the midst of it all, I felt a quiet warmth blooming in my chest, a sense of justice, a moral victory that no wealth could quantify. Vanessa's panic was palpable. She shifted in her seat, her usual elegance replaced by tension, her carefully crafted poise crumbling. Every move she had made to claim ownership, to erase my presence, now worked against her. The very actions she had thought would secure her triumph became the evidence of her own selfishness, her betrayal of the family's trust, and the reason Daniel had ensured that justice would follow. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave my shoulders, though my heart still raced with disbelief and elation. Could not help but smile faintly, a smile that spoke of survival, vindication, and moral triumph. Daniel had anticipated everything. He had loved me enough, even in his absence, to protect me from harm, to guard my rights, and to ensure that the truth would emerge. Vanessa's face contorted in a mixture of anger, shock, and desperation. This is ridiculous," she stammered, her voice cracking under the weight of her own exposure. Daniel would never have meant for, but it didn't matter what she said now. The legal document had spoken, and the consequences were immediate. Property titles, financial accounts, and rights to assets were now officially in my name. The house that had once been a battleground of betrayal now belonged to me, the mother Daniel had loved and respected. I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief, of justice served, of dignity restored. For the first time since his death, I felt Daniel's presence not as a shadow of grief, but as a guiding force of wisdom and love. He had thought of every detail, foreseen every possible betrayal, and acted decisively to ensure I would not be left helpless. The weight of loss was still there, but it was now tempered with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and moral victory. Vanessa sat frozen, her face pale, as the reality of her failure sank in. The arrogance and cruelty that had once given her confidence were now her undoing, her actions serving as proof of her true character. The room had shifted irreversibly. The power balance was no longer in her favor. I stood slowly, my hands still trembling slightly, and met her gaze without anger, without triumph, only quiet certainty. I had been wronged, cast aside, and humiliated. But justice had been served not by my own efforts, but by the foresight and love of the son I had lost. Daniel had orchestrated a reversal that was as clever as it was just, a final gift that extended far beyond wealth or property. It was a testament to his love, his intelligence, and his unwavering care for me. As I looked around the room, I felt a profound sense of closure beginning to settle over me. The betrayal had been met with consequences, the injustice rectified, and the truth revealed. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the warmth of hope, and to recognize that even in death, Daniel had protected me, guided me, and ensured that the light of justice would shine brightly. The reading concluded, but the impact lingered. Vanessa's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. while I sat with a quiet, victorious calm. Daniel's final plan had succeeded. His mother was safe, his love had been honored, and the truth had triumphed over deceit. In that moment, I realized that loss, grief, and betrayal had been transformed into strength, justice, and an enduring legacy of love. The first step back into the house felt surreal. I paused at the threshold, letting my hand linger on the familiar doorframe. The scent of home, a mixture of old wood, warm carpeting, and faint traces of Daniel's presence, welcomed me quietly, as if nothing had changed, yet everything had. This house, once a place of grief and betrayal, now felt like a sanctuary once more, a space reclaimed not only by law, but by love, by memory, and by the moral justice Daniel had secured for me. The atmosphere inside was markedly different from the days I had been cast out. Where Vanessa had once strutted with confidence, now there was a cautious, almost fearful silence. Neighbors and friends whispered about the dramatic reversal, some in shock, others in admiration of Daniel's foresight. Even distant relatives, who had once watched the family drama unfold in polite curiosity, now regarded me with quiet respect. The truth, finally revealed, had shifted perceptions, demonstrating the stark contrast between greed and integrity. I wandered slowly through the rooms, each step a mixture of nostalgia and healing. The living room where Daniel and I had spent countless evenings laughing, planning, and dreaming now felt restored, reclaimed not by force or confrontation, but by the quiet assertion of rightful care. I touched the back of the sofa, remembering how Daniel had always insisted I sit there, insisting it was my favorite spot. I smiled softly, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, a blend of sorrow and gratitude. The world outside continued as it always had, but within these walls, a profound transformation had occurred. Vanessa, once a figure of dominance and control, now faced the consequences of her actions. Her entitlement, arrogance, and cruelty had been laid bare, not just to me, but to all who witnessed the will's reading. She could no longer claim innocence or ignorance. The community, long unaware of her true nature, now saw her as she truly was: selfish, manipulative, and unworthy of the trust she had so blatantly abused. Though there was no overt confrontation, Vanessa's presence was reduced to a formality. She lingered at the edges, attempting polite civility, but her attempts were hollow, her dominance extinguished. The house that had once been a battlefield of wills was now a place of clarity, where actions had consequences and integrity had been affirmed. I realized in a quiet, reflective moment that this was more than victory over a person. It was a restoration of justice, a moral triumph that no argument, no harsh word could diminish. Sitting in Daniel's favorite chair, I allowed myself to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. I remembered the raw, unbearable grief of losing him, the days when I wandered aimlessly through the streets or hid my sorrow behind borrowed walls. I recalled the shock, humiliation, and despair when Vanessa had cast me out, the sting of betrayal cutting deeper than any loss I had previously known. Each memory, painful though it was, now seemed like a stepping stone, leading me to this moment of clarity and rightful restoration. I realized that my journey had not been just about reclaiming property or assets. It had been about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my sense of belonging. Daniel had orchestrated a path that not only ensured my survival, but also highlighted the strength inherent in love, foresight, and moral courage. His final gift was not merely wealth. It was a profound affirmation that those who act with integrity and love, even in the face of unimaginable pain, are ultimately protected and honored. Outside the house, the world continued its rhythm, but inside, a quiet peace settled. The neighbors who had once whispered behind doors now offered smiles, subtle nods, and small gestures of recognition. Friends extended invitations, calls of concern, and expressions of relief. Even family members who had remained neutral throughout the tension now approached with warmth, acknowledging the rightful restoration of both home and honor. It was a subtle but powerful affirmation that justice, even when delayed, was always noticed and respected. In the evenings, I would sit by the window, gazing at the garden Daniel had loved, reflecting on the strange combination of pain and satisfaction that defined this chapter of my life. The grief for my son remained no legal clause. No reversal of fortune could erase the emptiness of his absence. Yet the bitterness of betrayal had been replaced by a quiet strength, a sense that the moral order had been restored. The house, my home, once again, became a sanctuary not only of memories, but of resilience, where love and justice coexisted in a delicate but enduring balance. I often found myself speaking softly to Daniel, recounting the events of the past months, expressing my gratitude for the wisdom and care he had extended even from beyond the grave. In my heart, I felt his presence, a guiding force that had helped me navigate the labyrinth of grief, betrayal, and uncertainty. His love had been the constant thread, binding together loss and redemption, sorrow and justice, despair and hope. As the days passed, I gradually resumed a sense of normalcy. The house was no longer a place of confrontation, but of memory, love, and restoration. Vanessa, while still present in family circles, had been diminished in influence, her manipulations exposed, her character laid bare. And one, though forever carrying the weight of Daniel's absence, walked with a quiet confidence, strengthened by the knowledge that love, foresight, and integrity could overcome even the deepest betrayals. In the end, the story was one of duality, pain intertwined with relief, grief interwoven with justice. The heartbreak of loss was never erased, but it had been transformed into a testament of strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love endures and truth prevails. As I sat in Daniel's chair, in the home I had once lost and now regained, I felt a profound mixture of sorrow and satisfaction. It's a sense of completion that only the bond between mother and child could inspire. Justice had been served, betrayal exposed, and love had triumphed it through confrontation or vengeance. But through wisdom, foresight, and the enduring power of a son's care for his mother. In that quiet, reflective moment, I realized that while life may bring loss and pain, it also brings unexpected vindication and the reassurance that love in its purest form is never truly gone.